Thank you, Luca. So I have a little dog, and her name is Peppy, and she's a 15-year-old dog now, but she was 10 when I first met her. That's a photo of her there when she was 10. I know she looks like a puppy, but she really wasn't. And she was brought into a shelter as a lost dog. So we didn't really know what her story was and what happened to her. But what we did know was that she was old, and she was a brown dog with really short, dry, scruffy fur, and she wasn't desexed and had a really big hernia on her joint, in her groin. And what made her stand out to me was when I was at the kennels and I was walking around looking at all the dogs, they all came running up to the front, they were barking and excited and trying to get my attention. And she was the only one that was just lying there on her side, just staring off into space like she'd given up on life. And it wasn't until I went up to the front of the cage to say hello to her that she realized that somebody cared. And then she gave me a little wag of a tail and licked my finger, and the rest, as they say, was history. Now, it took me about a year to turn her around from that to that, but really that wasn't the intention. As a veterinarian, I just felt really sorry for her because she was such a sickly little thing that I wanted to give her a nice home for a couple of years before she passed away. What I didn't expect was 2 months after, with pain relief and walking her twice a day, she started running again. And before that, she would only hobble around and walk really slowly. And it took about 3 months before she started to really wag her tail and be excited to see me. But the real miracle for me was, about a year down the track, it turned out that she wasn't actually a brown dog with short, dry, scruffy fur. She was actually a black dog with really long, lush, soft fur. And the thing was, I didn't do anything particularly special. We vaccinated her and desexed her and fixed up the hernia in the groin. We gave her good dog food, parasite control, a good home, and lots of love. And next thing you knew, she was a completely different dog. And 5 years down the track, she's still here with us, chugging on strong. And so she is my daily reminder of why I do what I do here at Vets Beyond Borders, which is about providing basic healthcare to dogs in developing communities, because it does make such a huge difference to them. But it's not just about the dogs, it's also about the people. So in these developing communities where we work, there is a disease called rabies, and we're very lucky not to have it here in Australia. And what happens with rabies is that if you're not a vaccinated person and you're bitten by a stray dog with rabies, and you don't get the post-exposure shots, you will basically die within weeks or months or in a very terrifying way. And unfortunately, most of these people that get rabies are children in these communities, and they are often bitten by stray dogs. And so you can understand when these people react by killing these dogs, because if you get rid of the dogs, you get rid of the problem, right? Makes perfect sense. But the issue is these dogs breed really quickly, and next thing you know, they've repopulated, and you're back to square one, while rabies just runs rounds in circles. And so the solution that we present, which is about vaccination desexing, the idea is to turn these dogs from being the threat to being the solution. And so we'll vaccinate these dogs so they can't get or transmit rabies, and we'll desex them as well so they don't make more puppies that are not vaccinated, but also they will stay there and defend their territory. And once we've got about 70% of a population of the dogs in the village treated that way, they basically become immune to rabies. And so when other dogs and other animals with rabies from the outside try to get in, they can't. They stop where the vaccinated dogs start. And many thanks to Fondation Brigitte Bardot. They funded this program in 2005 where we started off in Sikkim. And it's been 6 years now, 2 years after we started. We haven't had a single case of a human rabies death reported in the hospitals. So it does work. Now, and so the solution to rabies and to animal welfare basically boils down to basic healthcare in dogs. And so the question is, if it's just vaccination desexing, which is considered completely routine here in Australia, then why aren't these communities and governments just go out setting them up? Or if they did, why aren't they as successful as they need to be? And look, there could be many reasons for that, but basically getting these programs right in the first place is actually not as easy as it looks. And the first thing I'd like to talk about in the first half of the equation is about trust. Now, the first time I had the opportunity to go watch dog catching in action, I was in a place called Ooty, which is in the south of India, and I was there with our CEO at the time to visit a partnering organization that basically runs out of the UK, but they had their clinic in Ooty. And so the clinic was built on the side of a very steep, precarious hill, just like all the other buildings there. And that's actually the view from when you're scrubbing up for surgery of just like the rolling hills and tea plantations. And it's absolutely stunning. And so to get the dogs for this program, we basically had to travel a couple of hours away to a neighboring village, down winding mountain roads and literally past elephants. And guys, if you thought kangaroos are bad, elephants are worse. Anyway, the deal was very simple. So in the morning, we load the truck up with the dogs that are due for release. We drive down, we drop the dogs off, pick up some new dogs, bring them to the clinic, and they stay in overnight and have the surgery done the next day. It's a very straightforward deal. And so the first village that we came to, and we've worked there a few times before, they were pretty good about it, and they were very curious, but we were still at the stage where we were giving out flyers and telling people what we were doing. And we met these three guys, and they remembered us from the last time, and they got really excited. They were like, oh no, hang on. And they came back with their pet dog that they were really like some desexing and vaccination done with. So that was great. So for the most part, the people in this village were really, really welcoming and very open to what we were doing. But on the other side of town, that was a different story. There was community resistance. And to put it simply, they were scared for their dogs. And you could see it and you could feel it in the air. So at one stage, we spotted this black Labrador-looking like dog. And it was followed by a rather dramatic roll-up of the whole dog catching in front of the whole village. But basically, it took us a while, and we finally managed to chase down and corner and catch this dog, when this very angry man turned up. And one of the kids had gone to get him, and he was clearly the owner of this dog. And look, we spent all this energy trying to catch this dog, and we really didn't want to have to do it again. So we were really nice and tried to explain in the nicest possible way about what we were doing and how this is about healthcare, and we'll bring your dog back in a few days. But he wouldn't hear a bar of it. At the end of the day, the bottom line was he didn't want his dog taken away, even if it's for healthcare. Just give us our dog back. And that was him carrying back up the hill in front of the whole village. So they were watching. So whilst we went around and caught lots of other dogs in the village, we also saw a lot of people actually actively hiding their dogs, or if not, chasing the dogs away from our truck. And as we're driving back in the dusk, back to the clinic, the local team leader, and he's been working on these projects for quite a while, and he said to us, it's always a bit tough like that in the beginning. Because what's happened is like these people in these villages, they've had the authorities or bounty hunters come in over the years, culling or shooting their dogs, not in the nicest way, sporadically and for years, even pet dogs. And because pet dogs wander the streets during the day, that's just what they do. And they often catch these dogs with ropes, and there's a lot of manhandling involved, so the dogs often would bleed from wounds inflicted by the ropes digging into their bodies, or they're bashed, or they're thrown around with no regard for their being. Or sometimes they're shot in front of everyone, or poisoned to death with strychnine, which means that they convulse to death on the streets. So no wonder these guys are scared for their dogs. Nobody wants that. And so in order to regain the trust of these villages and the communities, what we have to do is basically bring the dogs back in good or if not better health, but more importantly, make sure we catch these dogs in a different way to show from the very beginning that we're not here to harm, but to help. And so they can recognize that. And so we use and teach a method using butterfly nets, but obviously they're modified, they're much bigger, they're dog size. And it actually turns out that it's more efficient anyway, because you don't have to muck around with ropes and nooses and getting things in the right spot and stuff. And when I was out there with them on the road, they were like, and I'm not a dog catcher, so they were like, oh, Charmaine, I think you just stay in the truck and take photos. I'm like, yeah, I can do that, because I don't want to get in the way. And it was really cool to watch. So what these boys would do, they would pick up the ropes and they would kind of walk around and pretend like there's nothing happening. And while the dogs would be looking at them, and then when they've got enough guys surrounding the dog, it's like bam, and they catch it. And obviously the dogs react, and they don't really no one likes being netted, so they do cry and stuff. But the magic happens when we pop them into the truck with the other free-roaming dogs. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, there are other dogs here. And I'm okay, and you're okay, and oh, I wonder what's going on. And then they do, and then they check each other out, and, sniff bums and do that sort of thing and make friends. They do. And occasionally they'll fight, but most of the time they don't, because they're too busy just wondering what's going on. And it's actually quite cute to watch. And so as a result of that, of the whole thing, and because we don't hurt the dogs, we actually really enjoy it now that the villagers actually watch us catch the dogs, because it gives us a real opportunity to bond with the people and get them to understand what we're doing. And it's the same deal bringing the dogs back. So when we bring the dogs back to the village, we basically just have to make sure that we drop them off exactly where we found them. So record keeping and using things like collars or paints on their head to identify these dogs become really important. And most of these teams are pretty good at identifying the dogs and remembering where they've come from. But sometimes people do get lazy and they'll just drop the dogs off wherever. But that is essentially a disaster, because these dogs have just had surgery done and they are weaker and they basically haven't got the strength to fend for themselves in a new place altogether. And sad to say, but we did have one of these things happen at one of our projects a couple of years ago. So we actually had to get into a big fight and put our foot down and say, no, that's just not acceptable, because it's completely detrimental to the whole project. Everything that you've done before that will be completely wasted. But the team I was with that day, they were pretty good. And as we drove past the cricket fields, because cricket fields everywhere in India, and in the morning sun, we just drop the dogs off, and they'll often run off straight away. And sometimes they'll even turn around and give you one last look before they go off. And the nice thing is, there's no fear in their eyes. And during the drive as well, we often meet a lot of other dogs that we've worked on before, and they have no fear either. And to me, that's a job well done. And so, in the best of cases, and in one of our place, on our projects in Sikkim, where we've been working there for over 8 years now, it gets even better. So instead of having to go out to catch dogs sometimes, some of the villagers actually do the catching for us because they trust us so much. And these are the kids actually bringing their dogs to our clinic, which is great. And I think that's the best case scenario, really. So something so seemingly simple like dog catching can actually make a huge difference to and make a break of these projects. And so training dog catchers, which is sometimes easily overlooked, is actually one of the most critical parts of these programs. Which brings me to the second half of the equation, which is about skill. So with desexings, there's surgery, and the surgeries are usually performed by veterinarians. And the question I usually get asked here is, don't these guys have vet schools? And yes, they do. But livestock, so cattle, goats, poultry, donkeys, that's everything to them. That's their livelihood, and that's what puts food on the table. So vet schools teach 90% livestock work and 10% about dogs and cats from textbooks. And as vets anyway, we really learn our surgical skills from our mentors when we get thrown out into the real world. And so when there aren't enough good mentors around to teach good surgery, then it gets really tough, particularly in rural areas. And so even with the best of intentions, some of these projects just don't really take off. Maybe the vets don't do enough surgeries in a day, or maybe they're not done as well as they could be. These surgeries are tough, and we think of them here as routine here in Australia, but really there's nothing routine about it over there. These dogs are older, they're bigger, they're harder to operate on. Sometimes you don't know what to expect, and it's even harder when the equipment and the facilities aren't great. So I remember doing surgery in the middle of summer in China when the electricity died halfway, and you've got this headlamp on your head and you've got sweat pouring down your face, and you're trying to see what you're doing, and at the same time not sweating over the wound. It's a very stressful situation, and it's tough. So unfortunately, on some of these programs, some dogs do experience complications as a result, and some dogs do die, which really makes us question what we're doing in the first place and what's the point of it all. And some dogs also don't get enough anesthesia or don't get enough pain relief, which actually kind of puts them in a worse position than they were in the first place. And so yes, these programs have their critics, which explains why in some places they would rather just cull the dogs if they haven't got the expertise to set these programs up. And to go into a little bit more detail, tell a bit more about it without going into gory details, I once met this girl not long ago last year, and she's an animal welfare champion from Pakistan, and she was visiting Sydney at the time. And she asked us very genuinely, Charmaine, is it normal for my dog to moan when she's being desexed on the surgical table with her abdomen open? It's not. And I had another friend who was living in Sri Lanka at the time, and she called me up here in Australia, and she was like, Charmaine, there's a dog that's just been desexed recently, and her guts are hanging outside of her body. And it's been days now, and she's just going to die. What do we do? And the thing is, there's nothing you can do. The vet clinic is miles away. And to be honest, I wasn't sure about telling you guys this. As you can see, it's very emotional for me. Because I feel it's like a little bit of an expose, like I'm betraying my profession. But I feel it needs to be told because it happens. But really, it's no one's fault. All vets around the world want to do the right thing, especially if it's welfare work for dogs and cats. That's why we're in it in the first place, because we want to help. And I mean, there's no glory or money in it, and we're really just there because we want to make a difference. And so it's not their fault that they haven't got access to the level of education and support that we have here. So that's what we're trying to do at Vets Beyond Borders, is we're trying to close this gap. If these guys haven't got access to the education and the training and the support over there, and it's going to take too long to change the system, let's just bring our vet schools to them. So already on the ground, we do train our ground staff pretty well, but a couple of years ago, we launched a very special project called Vet Train, together with AusAid and the University of Queensland's vet school. And so that's one of the surgeons there. And with Vet Train, what we basically do is we train people, only vets that are committed to animal welfare. And over 2 weeks, we train them from the beginning to the end. So from starting by sewing 2 pieces of cloth together all the way to the end. We teach them on the need, on how to manage anesthesia and as well as the need for pain relief. And we also teach them on what to do when the unexpected happens and when the going gets tough. Because guys, let's just make sure that the splotch surgeries don't happen in the first place. And so this is the second time we've run this project. The first time was with the Marchik Animal Welfare Trust and the RSPCA International in India in 2009. And the second time around, we really wanted to do it on a bigger scale to prove to the Indian government what could be achieved. And it was a great year. We trained over 300 vets and paravets, and this is one of the groups in Sikkim, on how to run these projects. And by the end of it, we had a huge waiting list. And when you think about it, if one vet dissects 10 dogs a day, 1 year, it's only 2,400 dogs. By 300 vets were doing it, that's over 700,000 dogs. And if one vet vaccinated 100 dogs a day, that's over 7 million dogs in a year. So through rethinking the way we deliver these projects, capacity building is absolutely the way forward, and that's what we want to do, and now we're in negotiations with the Indian government to hopefully make this a permanent program. So animal welfare, the basic healthcare is the key to make for animal, in terms of animal welfare and human healthcare as well, but only if it's done well and done right. Only then can we stop the rabies in kids, as well as have happier, healthier dogs as part of these communities. And so through catching these dogs kindly and really bringing them back in better health than before, only then will we get the community support so that they help us rather than hinder us. And also with skill, with good surgeries and good pain relief, will we definitely now know that the dogs are better off because of us. And so this is what we live by at Vets Beyond Borders, and this is what we do, and this is what has led our projects to be successful so far. And we're just at the beginning. And so when you think about it, Peppy's a really lucky dog. She was brought into a shelter by caring people, and she was vaccinated and desexed without a hitch, even as an old, sickly little thing. But the dogs in these communities are not quite so lucky. So not only do they not have access to basic healthcare, they are blamed for a disease over which they have no control, and they're hunted down relentlessly for it. But the good thing is, in every one of these communities, there are people that care. So if we can give them the skill, the hope, and most importantly, a vision of what their future could be like, then they can help themselves create their better world of better health for animals and people. So thank you.